The government goes into Trump shock with the US's 50% tariff announcement this week. National Security Advisor Doval was in Moscow to prepare for a Putin visit. Modi spoke to Brazilian president, plans a trip to China. What made trade ties sour, and have the US penalties on Russian oil turned India's foreign policy calculus around? Hello and welcome. This is Worldview at The Hindu and I'm Sahasini Heather. Now, for yet another week, we are trying to analyze what's happening in India-US ties, as developments between the two countries are not only taking a drastic turn, they could lead to a major shift in Indian foreign policy priorities. Here's what happened just this week. After announcing a hefty 25% tariffs on India as trade talks failed to make a breakthrough, US President Trump then lobbed an added 25% penalty tariff for buying Russian oil. He also indicated there would be no more FTA talks that were, remember, launched in February when he met with Prime Minister Modi in Washington until this Russian oil situation is resolved. So a cryptic comment there. The Ministry of External Affairs issued two statements. They call the moves unfortunate, unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable. Prime Minister Modi also indicated that he would not submit to US pressure over market access for agriculture and dairy items, GM foods. He invoked protections for India's farmers at a public lecture. Listen in.
हमारे लिए अपने किसानों का हित सर्वोच्च प्राथमिकता है। भारत अपने किसानों के, पशुपालकों के और मछुआरे भाई बहनों के हितों के साथ कभी भी समझौता नहीं करेगा।
So it's important to note that no actual action has been taken by India thus far, but certainly very, very strong statements being made. In addition, National Security Advisor Doval traveled to Moscow to meet with President Putin and hold talks for a Putin visit to India. Does this mean India is doubling down on its Russian oil imports? Remember, Putin and Trump are also expected to meet next week, possibly in the UAE. Then Prime Minister Modi spoke to Brazil President Lula. Brazil, like India, faces 50% tariffs from the US, and Lula now wants to look at a joint BRICS response, saying he wants to see just how all the BRICS countries have been impacted. And India will, remember, host the BRICS summit next year.
Today there is nothing, but tomorrow there will be. There is no articulation in the BRICS, but there will be. Tomorrow I will call President Modi. Then I will call President Xi Jinping. Then I will call other presidents, and I'm going to try to discuss with them about how each one is doing in this situation, what the implications are for each country, so we can make a decision.
Later this month, Modi plans to travel to Japan and then to China for the SCO summit. This is a first since the Galwan clashes in 2020. He's expected to hold talks with Xi Jinping in Tianjin. Both sides have already reopened visas. They're restarting flights and plan to resolve business issues. So in a sense, is India showing a different priority for its foreign policy in the wake of the US's actions? The question, is it just about the penalty tariffs? What's really driving India's reaction? One, the MEA has flagged what it calls double standards of the United States. The US continues to trade with Russia on critical minerals, fertilizers, etc. And the US has not imposed penalties on Europe or China that also continue to trade on energy with Russia. In fact, The Hindu has a great data story that you might like to read on that issue. Second, the trade slab of 25% that was imposed last week is likely to force Indian exporters to drop their prices and their margins just to stay competitive with others in Asia like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, all of whom have negotiated lower tariff rates below 20%. And remember, many Indian exporters are already getting that call from the US holding off some of the orders. So all of this is hurting. Trump's persistent statements on mediating the Operation Sindoor conflict has definitely damaged India's counter-terror narrative in the world. Trump's courting of ties with Pakistan will hurt the Modi government's strategy of isolating the neighbor. The fourth, India chose not to react when Trump clamped down on immigration and visas, deported hundreds of Indians a few months ago. But this too is hurting the economy. Fifth, the uncertainty is now casting a shadow over Quad cooperation, technology transfers, other parts of the India-US relationship, and evoking memories of other times that the US has let India down, from 1971 in Bangladesh's liberation war to the 1998 sanctions for nuclear tests. So the question then that is being asked by many and is really on everyone's mind, the subject of much speculation, what exactly is driving Donald Trump's destructive actions, really taking an axe to the India-US relationship here? So as I said, this is a lot of speculation about what may be responsible. But the first really is that Trump is upset about not having a trade agreement with India, one of the biggest markets. And he is particularly angry over the lack of access for American corn, chicken, and soy, as well as dairy and GM foods, particularly as many of these are produced in Republican constituencies. The second speculation that some of the disappointment is because he drove trade talks in Trump 1.0 as well in his first tenure, and he failed to get India to the finishing line before he lost elections in 2020, and that has also remained with him. The third speculation, Modi's decision not to meet Trump on 3 separate visits to the US, even when Trump had publicly announced they would meet. Remember, he was in the opposition at the time, he was a candidate for the elections, and that may have, however, been seen as a snub that stayed with Trump. Fourth, India's refusal to give the US credit for the India-Pakistan ceasefire is countering Trump's bid for a Nobel Peace Prize. Pakistan, remember, gave that recommendation right away. So was that a factor in Trump's decision and unhappiness with India?
Some reports suggest that the Modi-Trump call on June 17th discussing the issue after the G7 summit in Canada proved acrimonious, and that was the final straw.
Fifth, New Delhi has also lost those it connected to Trump with in the past. One of them was, of course, the daughter Ivanka Trump, her husband Jared Kushner. They're no longer in the White House in Trump 2.0. NSA Mike Waltz, who was a former leader of the Indian American caucus, had to quit over what was called Signalgate. So definitely Delhi is lacking right now in diplomatic interlocutors, is what some say. I spoke to India's former ambassador, Arun Singh, about just what the situation needs. Is this a 1971 moment for India-US ties? Also, should India actually give in, as it did in 2017 on Russian oil, on Iranian oil, or stand firm as it did in 2022?
There has always been a lingering suspicion about the US-India relationship. There have been bitter memories here of the US seen as a coercive and an unreliable partner over the decades since India's independence, for their own reasons. Because, every country defines its foreign policy based on what they see as their perception of their interest. But for the last 25 years, the US has been making a very determined effort to come out of that perception. But what has happened now, and I think which is really the loss, that because of what President Trump has done, in India, there's a resurrection of the memories of the US as a coercive and unreliable partner. So President Trump and the US may feel that they are putting some penalties on India, high tariffs. I would say that they are putting high tariffs and penalties less on India and more on the US-India relationship. That it will take some time for the relationship to come out from this shock that has been generated, because for the last 25 years, there have been differences on issues. But both sides have managed the relationship in a way that they're sensitive to each other's concerns and compulsions.
The question then is, has India moved beyond that idea that it can zero out or even reduce its oil intake from Russia? Or can it go back to that 2017 idea?
Now, the Russia relationship is a very different relationship. If you look at the global level, Russia is not Iran. The main global contestation is between US, Russia, and China. And you would want Russia as one of the major poles in the international context to be an important partner of India. And there's a memory in India of Russia in the past have provided political support, kind of defense technology that nobody else was willing to provide. So you don't want to lose that the frame of the relationship. Second, if the US feels that you are giving in to their pressure on even a relationship like Russia, you should prepare yourself for even greater demands in the years to come. And then essentially you will end up becoming, subservient ally of the United States. And I think the Indian system cannot accept being that position. So I think Russia is not Iran. And on Russia, not just now, but historically, there would be a red line. If you see some of the comments a lot of people have made, that the Russia, I had even myself said it on a number of occasions, that the Russia relationship is one where India just cannot compromise.
Finally, I do want to ask you, you mentioned trust and the technology partnership. There's also the technology transfer, the TOT deal on jet engines that was started more than a year ago and still hasn't seen much movement. And then finally, there's that big pillar of India-U.S. cooperation in the Indo-Pacific of the Quad summit expected later this November. You spoke about the idea that India and the U.S. need time to perhaps repair this relationship. What does the current situation mean for all of these?
From India's perspective, as I could see, the argument was made that because India was part of the Quad, US was willing to have more avenues for cooperation with India and also give high-level technology access to it. But if the US is going to put sanctions on India, the kind we are talking about, or if technology cooperation slows down, or if US companies are discouraged from investing in India, because Trump himself has said that he doesn't want Apple to invest in India, or he doesn't want US companies to manufacture in China or to hire in India. So if those areas of cooperation are not there, then people will legitimately ask the question as to what is the benefit for India from Quad. So that's a legitimate question.
India's former ambassador Arun Singh there. Now, what's worldview's take? Given Donald Trump's mercurial past, it's quite conceivable that this storm in India-US ties will pass. But it has drawn a red line in trust that India and the US took great pains to build over the past 25 years. While the Modi government reassesses its own mistakes in handling Trump, it is necessary to chart a future course now for India that is neither unnecessarily meek nor avoidably abrasive with the US. Finding comfort in old partnerships like BRICS countries cannot completely negate the need for a constructive US relationship. This week, I'm going to get you some reading recommendations, but those aren't books because developments are moving so quickly, but some really great articles I've read this week. One by my colleague at The Hindu, Verghese George, Takeaways for India from the Trump Moment, really talking about how strategic autonomy has come into its own with this. The second is an article by Evan Feigenbaum. He's a former official in the US, which is called Donald Trump Risks Tanking 25 Years of US-India Relations. It's a much-read article. The third, an older one, I may have spoken about it before, by Ashley Tellis, called India's Great Power Delusions. This is in Foreign Affairs, and it looks at why there may be a disappointment in Washington vis-a-vis New Delhi. But also on the same website is a podcast. It's called The Uncertain Future of US Relations with India. A much more timely conversation with Ashley Tellis, Nirupama Rao, and Dhruv Jaishankar. Then there's in the Financial Times an article I did enjoy, India's Russian oil conundrum, yield to Donald Trump or face tariff backlash. So it puts that whole argument into place. And of course, lots more stories on our website, www.thehindu.com. But that's all we have time for here on Worldview. From the team, thanks for watching.